You want me to put that on my Tudor?
This One's Wife. Confessions of a Female Founder. Hit or shit? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. The first episode of This One's Wife's Confessions of a Female Founder was launched yesterday. Let's have a look at how it was received across the media. The Daily Telegraph TV critic Chris Bennion described the show as having an inane stream of mindless aphorisms with no confessions or secrets. He said, "There are plenty of self-care aphorisms, journeys of self-love and validation, discussions of bottling your essence, and great handfuls of mutual adoration." He added, "The frustrating thing is that Wolf Herd, who is just 35, presumably does have wisdom to impart, having been part of the team that created Tinder before she created Bumble. Mr. Bennion lamenting the absence of any actual insight or business wisdom. The Guardian tells us, with the headline, "Confessions of a Female Founder Review. This One's Wife's sycophantic interview podcast is stomach-turning. Sitting in a podcast studio, talking to wealthy women who worship her, is clearly far more This One's Wife's scene than enduring the remorselessly vicious press and strange, alienating traditions of these shores," referring to the United Kingdom. "As ever is more than a money-making scheme. It is, as our host puts it on this podcast, an extension of my essence. Of course, one cannot extend one's essence alone. This One's Wife, who after that eye-watering 'You Know I'm Sussex Now' retort to Mindy Kaling in her TV series, seems to be going fully mononymous. Needs advice. She gets it from Wolf Herd, who tells her not to sweat the small stuff. This One's Wife is very concerned about the packaging of her products, and that enormous amounts of money don't make you happy." Well, that's likely to fall on deaf ears in relation to This One's Wife, because as a somatic narcissist, the pursuit of money is hugely important to her. As you know, it is a residual benefit which then allows her to assert control over people and draw fuel by way of their reactions to her wealth. The Daily Mail states, "Reviews dismiss This One's Wife's latest podcast as an inane stream of mindless aphorisms and stomach-turning." And rather than create their own headline, they basically pull together other newspapers' observations about it. The New York Times is somewhat more neutral and states, "On her new podcast, This One's Wife talks media scrutiny, kindness, and family." I think that's probably the fairest that they feel that they can be. They certainly don't endorse it, they don't praise it, but they don't criticise it either. The Irish Times tells us, "This One's Wife's new podcast, an ego-fluffing conversation underlining the culture gap between Ireland and the United States. Confessions of a Female Founder doesn't feature any ear-pricking insights. It also isn't about any specific business world struggles that anyone who wishes to emulate Wolf Herd's success could either relate to or learn from. Instead, it's about loving yourself. A revolutionary act," This One's Wife and Whitney agree. "Being a cheerleader for your friends. And the trials of being in the public eye." The Super Soaraway Sun tells us, "This One's Wife says, as ever, overwhelms her, and she stresses about celebs unboxing items." Oh dear, such a hard life. Metro tells us, "This One's Wife reveals rare and scary health battle after childbirth." Daily Express, Royal Family Recap. "This One's Wife faces technical issues just minutes after announcement." Hello! This One's Wife reveals scary preeclampsia diagnosis as she opens up about life with cowboy-loving Archie and Lilibet. People, This One's Wife reveals her scary experience with postpartum preeclampsia on new podcast. Harper's Bazaar, This One's Wife gets vulnerable on the first episode of her new podcast. The Times, Confessions of a Female Founder review. This One's Wife's vapid lessons in self-love. And I'm going to return to that review presently because it is particularly worthwhile scrutinizing it further. But a selection of headlines from outlets that ordinarily are critical of This One's Wife are more neutral of her, and those that are supportive of her give the clear impression that this is a failure. How so? Well, the ones that are critical of her don't hold back in their descriptions. Even The Guardian, which you might expect would be a little sympathetic, has little good to say about it. And the Telegraph and the Times and the Mail and the Express all pan it. Even the pro-Sussex outlets, such as Hello, People and Harper's, just focus basically on her revelation concerning the preeclampsia diagnosis. They don't espouse the virtues of it. They don't declare it a hit. They don't declare that it is fantastic and interesting. They simply tell you something that she tells you. Basically, they relay to you what the content of the podcast is rather than passing judgment on it, which naturally speaks volumes. A perusal of other headlines, and I don't need to take you through all of them, reveals much the same. Either criticisms of the vapid and fluffy nature of this podcast, which is light on business insight, and as ever about this one's wife, combined with simply telling you she reveals a health scare or talks about her family. It's safe to say that the overall outcome is it's shit. Those that are moved to actually report on making a judgment about it demonstrate that it is shit, whilst the others refrain from doing so, just telling you what it contains. It is not a favourable outcome. But how would this one's wife deal with all of this? Well, naturally, as the type of narcissist that she is, she wants to know what people have to say about it. And her narcissism will deal with the responses naturally as fuel because they're talking about her. The amounts aren't huge because it's the written word, but seeing herself written about in newspaper after media outlet after newspaper, it certainly adds up. Although it's coming from tertiary sources and isn't particularly potent or large in amount, it's certainly the case that she is receiving fuel that cumulatively serves a purpose for her. Thus, fuel is received, but there's plenty of challenge fuel in there, plenty of threats to control by way of the criticisms, and also the observations that come below the line. And the consequence of that is that this one's wife isn't going to contact each news outlet and point out to them where they've gone wrong. In order to directly nullify those threats to control, she'll simply do as she invariably does. She will just jettison the criticisms rather than take them on board, and she will cling to any favourable reviews, although it has to be said that's going to provide her with slim pickings because there's nobody gushing over it. There's nobody announcing in the mainstream media how wonderful it all is. The more favourable publications, as I pointed out, simply content themselves with telling you this is what she spoke about and aren't effusive in their praise. There's far more harsh but justified criticism of the podcast than there is supportive praise. And therefore, this one's wife's narcissism will simply tell her, well, this is the hateful British media, you didn't expect them to like it, and she'll just dismiss it. And this is part of the reason why she keeps fucking up, because she won't take on board any form of criticism. Much of it is justified, but she will never ever listen, because that's a threat to control, and a threat to control must be nullified, not embraced. And thus her narcissism rejects it. I mentioned earlier about the Times review, and it's worthwhile providing this to you in full. It's not particularly long, because you'll be entertained by what's written. James Marriott writes, having trashed the royal family, flopped on Netflix and been terminated by Spotify for the poor performance of her last podcast, Archetypes, this one's wife has reinvented herself as an entrepreneur. Her new company, as ever, sells jam and flour sprinkles to morons, presumably. Undaunted by the seeming blank lack of audience interest in archetypes, she has started a new podcast to go along with her business. Confessions of a Female Founder aims to inspire anyone who's interested in turning their own entrepreneurial dreams into a reality. Given that this one's wife only launched her first products last Wednesday, it will strike some listeners as rather early in her entrepreneurial career for her to start dispensing business advice. But she gives the impression of having never been much troubled by self-doubt. Just pausing there, entertaining to see that those who would be purchasing the items are referred to as morons. Furthermore, it is an accurate observation to state that she's never much been troubled by self-doubt, because her narcissism tells her, "You're brilliant, they will love it," and therefore it causes her to engage in such idiotic things as talking about being a female founder, when the business that she indeed has founded hasn't actually achieved anything. There is nothing to crow about here, but she thinks there is, because, as I have explained in parts passing, by fraternizing with successful business people, she thinks she's one as well, by virtue of her magical thinking and character trait acquisition. The review continues. Predictably, she has nothing to say about real business issues such as logistics, management techniques, or supply chain issues. And this, as we know, is because she doesn't know anything about business. Equally predictably, there is lots of guff about how to love yourself and spread positive energy through the world. I suspect that this is not the sort of thing most small business people spend much time fretting over. But then this one's wife's business isn't really a business. It's a bit like the corporate equivalent of Marie Antoinette's dairy farm, a pleasant game of make-believe for an idle rich woman. Receiving business advice from a Californian multimillionaire who owes a significant part of her fortune to marrying a prince is about as enjoyable and as illuminating as you would expect. James Marriott gets it. The only reason that this one's wife is wealthy and known is because of who she married. She has no business acumen. She has no insight. And therefore, why on earth would you listen to this vapid narcissist telling you about business when she's never run one, and the one that she's just created is basically a hobby which will go nowhere? This one's wife's first guest, the review continues, is wildly successful female entrepreneur Whitney Wolfe Herd, founder of the dating app Bumble and at one point the youngest female billionaire in the world. This one's wife says of Wolfe Herd, "We have such a deep personal connection and relationship of love." Pausing there, what the fuck has that got to do with business? Nothing. It's filler. There's no killer here. Wolfe Herd launches into a superlative fawning courtier routine, telling this one's wife that she and Harry are an iconic, elegant, classy couple, and that when she visits their home, she feels engulfed in love and coziness. Pausing there. I don't think that this is the way that Whitney Wolfe Herd ordinarily speaks. Could you imagine that you enter meetings with investors, with regulators, and you talk in such terms? You'd be laughed at. I think that she's been given a script. And I think what's happened here is she's either been given a script, or what she's doing is talking in a way that she believes this one's wife would want her to talk. Indeed, she's mirroring this one's wife. I don't say that to suggest that Whitney Wolfe Herd is a narcissist. Non-narcissists mirror also. But I really do not think that this is the way that Whitney Wolfe Herd ordinarily behaves, and she's simply speaking in a way that this one's wife would want to hear in order to get through this absolutely vapid pile of shite. She continues by stating she is astonished by how famous and how hard done by this one's wife is. Presumably this was also something that was agreed on as part of the extensive pity play of this one's wife. She tells her that when she went to Ireland, you were on the cover of every single magazine and newspaper in Ireland. My jaw hit the floor, she says. I know, this one's wife agrees self-pityingly, naturally exhibiting her victim mentality once again. This one's wife takes up a remarkable amount of airtime on the podcast. Well, that's a surprise, given that she sells jam as a hobby, and her guest is the billionaire founder of a global technology company. She is constantly congratulating herself on her attention to detail, such as official, evidently imagining she is a Steve Jobs-style visionary perfectionist. I was absolutely consumed with packaging, she boasts of the anxious months before her company launched. Boxes, it's all I could think about. Believe me, it wasn't. This one's wife is lazy. And what you're hearing here is another revision of history. Because she lacks the intelligence to provide any meaningful insights, what her narcissism does is decide, I'll make myself look obsessed about the detail because I'll be like Steve Jobs, character trait acquisition, a perfectionist. And therefore, boxes, it's all I could think about. Given the way that she speed read the detail on one of the flat prints of her packaging shows that she isn't about the detail. And this is just a wild boast, which is a revision of history. She was ruthlessly focused on such questions as, where does the sticker go? And what size is the box going to be? Often she found herself awake at 3 a.m. overthinking what I want the packaging to look like. She confesses that in her darkest moments, she would find herself fretting, that's not the unboxing experience I had in mind. Oh, fuck off. Your darkest moments are realizing you've got stage 4 cancer and you won't see your children grow up. Your darkest moments are that you find yourself in a prison cell in a far-flung land, accused of something you've not done, and doubting whether you'll see your family again. Your darkest moments are realizing that your business that you've built up is about to tank and go under, laying off thousands of jobs and affecting people's livelihoods, and your own financial security going up the Swanee. Those are darkest moments. Lying in bed thinking, oh, what is the box going to look like? That's not a darkest moment. But remember, this self-absorbed narcissist has to make it all about her. And because she lacks the experience, the ability, and the intelligence to tell us anything meaningful, she then makes herself look like a complete twat waffle by coming out with comments such as, I lay awake at night in my darkest moment fretting about what the unboxing experience would be like. Fuck off. You're a clown. How, she would wonder, are we going to pivot? All this was terribly important because her company is an extension of my essence. Well, that's probably why it stinks then. Wolf Herd can give as good as she gets in terms of spouting business cliches, or perhaps she knows this is what this one's wife wants to hear. The author of this review of a similar mind to me. Being an entrepreneur is about how you move through the world. It's about thinking outside the box. Surely it's more complicated than that. Along with everyone else in California, Wolf Herd has recently been on a journey of self-love and self-discovery, which resulted in her decision that I'm going to foundationally re-architect. What? That isn't even English. I mean, I know the words are English. I'm going to foundationally foundationally, that isn't a word. It's made up. Re-architect the way people date. Why don't you just put, I'm going to change the way people date? But in actual fact, you don't, because dating apps have been around for some time, and as I've mentioned elsewhere, and I will say it again, you really ought to avoid them. Watch my video, Why You Should Not Use Online Dating. Foundationally re-architect. This is the type of word salad drivel that you'd expect from this one's wife. And Wolf Herd coming out with this shite. It just shows what a bollocks podcast this is. I'm going to foundationally re-architect the way people date and the way people love. By this point, the journalist writes, I was seized by an urge to beat my head against the wall and foundationally re-architect my skull. Wolf Herd tells this one's wife that she wants to reinvent Bumble as a business that is about self-love. In a world that capitalizes on your self-doubt, this one's wife tells her smugly, loving yourself is a revolutionary act. Which frig magnet did she find that from? You need to swipe right on yourself first before you swipe right on others, Wolf Herd adds inanely. Perhaps this is why she agreed to appear on Confessions of a Female Founder. It's a research exercise for her new app. This one's wife, after all, is a world expert in self-love. 1 star. An excellent and entertaining review from the Times, which highlights the narcissism of this one's wife that shines through. Inane, pointless, doesn't do what it says on the tin, the usual fluff that we've come to know from this brainless woman, and overall, as I've explained earlier, the overall outcome is one, that it's shit, but this one's wife's narcissism will cause her to ignore any criticism. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.